Good morning and welcome to Tuesdays with the Pilgrim as we continue reading the Ted Scott flying adventure, Flying Against Time, with Chapter 8. Ted Scott was in a white rage when he left the doctor's office. It would have gone hard with Greg and Duck Gale had he come across them at that moment. Why did these scoundrels so persistently dog his steps? He had always been content to mind his own business and let them alone. All the aggression had come from their side. What had they not done? That cut strut in his machine? That rock that had whizzed by his head in the dark? The attempt to run him down in their car? And what they had done to those who were dearer to him than himself, the cowardly attack on the gray hairs of Eben and Charity Browning. But that was in the past. He had hoped that the chapter had been closed when the scoundrels were safely lodged in prison. Yet here they were out again, unchastened by adversity and up to their old tricks. Ted had not the slightest doubt that they had dropped that brick that might have seriously injured him. That they were responsible for the plane incident of that very afternoon, he also felt absolutely certain. He was in a ferment of wrath as he passed a low pool room frequented by the riffraff of Bromville. It was near closing time. Just as he came abreast of it, the swinging door was pushed open, and a couple of men came out with unsteady steps and moved away. But in that momentary swing of the door, Ted had caught a glimpse of three figures within, seated at a table, playing cards. One of them he recognized as Wellman, the proprietor of the resort. The other two were Greg and Duck Gale. On the spur of the moment, Ted stepped inside. He went in with an abruptness and determination that rather startled the trio, who rose from the table and looked at him uncertainly. "Good evening, Mr. Scott," said Wellman, rubbing his hands and smiling ingratiatingly. "This is an unusual pleasure. Won't you sit down and join us in a little game?" "No, thank you," said Ted shortly. "No offense to you, Wellman, but I don't care to play with jailbirds." The Gales flushed angrily. "Look out what you say, Ted Scott!" cried Duck. "That's fightin' talk!" exclaimed Greg huskily. "I mean it to be," retorted Ted. "Gentlemen, gentlemen," implored Wellman, dancing about them in a frenzy of excitement. "Please, please, don't make any trouble. There's some little misunderstanding. Why not sit down and talk the matter over?" "There's no misunderstanding," declared Ted. "I understand these curs only too well. They've been trying to do me up ever since they got back to Bromville." Greg and Duck looked at each other in consternation. Greg licked his dry lips. "It isn't true," Greg got out with difficulty. "It's the truth," stated Ted. He produced the package of doctored gum from his pocket. "Here's the dope gum you slipped into my coat this afternoon, and here's the cigarette you dropped by mistake." Greg snatched at the gum, but Ted was too quick for him. "Oh, no, you don't," he said. "Like to destroy the evidence, would you? Well, you can't." He turned quickly to a coat hanging on a peg. He thrust his hand into the pocket and pulled out a partially used package of gum. He smelled it. It was the harmless kind he commonly used. "Just 3 pieces left," he commented. "I remember now that I had used 2 sticks. This is what you took out of my pocket when you substituted the doped package, you rat." Greg made a grab at a heavy billiard cue lying on a nearby table. He never reached it. Ted's fist shot out and caught Greg flush on the jaw, knocking him to the floor. The young aviator turned just in time to avoid a rush from Duck. As Ted dodged his swing, Duck overbalanced himself and fell to the floor. "I'll get you for this!" screamed Greg, starting to rise. "Come ahead," challenged Ted. "I'm just beginning to fight." This was so evidently true that Greg remained on one knee, nursing his jaw. Duck, in the meantime, had got to his feet, but before hostilities could go any further, Wellman intervened. "Please don't keep this up, Mr. Scott," he begged. "I'm liable to have my license revoked if there's any trouble in my place. I've always tried to run my business quietly. Can't you settle this some other time and place, please?" There was a certain justice in this, and Ted Scott acknowledged the force of it, though he acceded with reluctance. Greg, now that the danger of a fight was over, became more belligerent. "Don't you think you've heard the last of this, Ted Scott?" he cried. "I'll pay you for this deed yet." "Come around and settle it at any time," replied Ted cheerfully. "But I want you fellows to know that I'm on to you. The next attempt you make against me you'll be sorry for. Sorry to have made a rumpus in your place, Mr. Wellman," he added, turning to the distracted proprietor. "Good night." He turned on his heel and passed through the swinging doors. 10 days or more went by, and at last the plane was complete and ready for trial runs. It had been finished in a phenomenal time, for the employees at the works, with all of whom Ted Scott was an idol, had outdone themselves to make it a wonderful miracle of speed and efficiency. "We had to make it fast and make it right, as a matter of self-interest, if nothing else," stated Mark Lawson, grinning. "For, oh boy, you're carrying a lot of our money. We'll all be broke, with the poorhouse yawning for us if you don't win this race against time. Even the errand boys have a bid on you." "Oh, if it's as bad as all that, I simply have to win," laughed Ted. "I hate to put you fellows in a hole, but I'll be able to tell better when I take this beauty up in the air." It was with a beating heart that Ted Scott climbed into the cockpit and put himself at the controls. Suppose, after all this time and labor, the plane should not do what was expected of it. He knew what a difference there was between theory and practice. More than once a machine that was expected to prove a meteor had shown that it was only mediocre when it mounted into the air. But the young aviator's trepidation vanished before he had been up for 10 minutes. The plane more than fulfilled all his expectations. It worked beautifully, responding to the controls perfectly. And when, after subjecting it to numerous tests, Ted let it out for speed, he jubilated as he saw that it whizzed along at a rate of 166 miles an hour. "Mighty close to 3 minutes a mile," he exulted. "That's traveling some." At the end of an hour's test, he brought it to the ground, where a number of his friends who had been watching his evolutions gathered about him. "How about it?" asked Walter Hapworth eagerly. "Did she do what you expected her to do?" "All that and more," declared the aviator as he stripped off his helmet and flying goggles. "Of course, she's a little stiff yet, and will be for a week or two until the newness wears off, and everything is functioning perfectly. But for the first trial, she's a wonder. I made 166, and could have made more, but I didn't want to ask too much of her at this stage of the game." 166? ejaculated Monet. "And you're figuring that she'll have to average 150 or thereabouts to make the coast-to-coast trip in 20 hours? "Well, that gives you a margin of 16 miles an hour, remarked Mark Lawson. "Yes, but that isn't enough," replied Ted. "A few hours of bucking headwinds would wipe that margin out and leave me in the hole. I need a possibility of 200 miles an hour, but I'm confident I'll get it with this machine as soon as she's working smoothly." "Have you any thought to a name for her?" asked Breck Lewis. "Not definitely," replied Ted. "It's a little early for christening. Have you anything to suggest, Walter?" he asked, turning to Mr. Hepworth. "I thought, when I saw you zipping through the sky, that she was shooting along like a comet," replied Hepworth. "What's the matter with that for a name? Comet." "Fine and dandy," agreed Ted. "Comet it shall be. Let's hope that she'll justify the name." Justify it she did in the days that followed. There were slight changes that had to be made, for the young aviator was critical and was not satisfied with anything less than perfection. But her speed steadily increased. Bill Thombley dropped in during the course of the test, and busy as Ted was, he gladly put all work aside for the time to chat with his old friend. "Whither bound, Bill?" Ted asked after the first delighted greetings were over. "I'm on the way back to the Rocky Mountains," replied Bill. "Bruin is short-handed, and he's been telegraphing me almost every day to hurry up and get back on the job. Wish you were going along, Ted. All the old gang would be tickled to see you again." "Well, there's nothing I would like better," replied Ted. "I often think of Roy Benedict and Ed Allenby and all the rest of that bunch of good fellows. I may stop over at Denver on my way back from the coast." "How are you feeling about the contest, Ted?" asked Bill. "Think you're going to make her in 20 hours?" "It's Los Angeles in 20 hours or bust," said Ted, grinning. "If my plane doesn't go back on me and the weather isn't too bad, I hope to make it. But those are two mighty big ifs." "Right they are," agreed Bill. "But if anybody on Earth can do it, you can. I'm betting my shirt on it." "Well, I hope you don't lose it," laughed Ted. "It would be awful to be shirtless during the winter." "I expect to win enough money to buy me a whole new gaudy outfit," replied Bill, grinning. "But talking about betting, Ted, there's a heap of money being put up all over the country." "I know there is," replied Ted with a frown. "A good deal more than suits me." "You can't keep people from doing it," replied Bill philosophically. "There's one funny thing about it, though, that I don't like." "Well, what's that?" asked Ted. "That all the professional gamblers are betting against you." And that's the end of Chapter 8. Next week we'll continue with Chapter 9, Suspicious Happenings. Ooh. Until then, take care, stay safe, and God bless.